Oh, well, welcome everyone. How's everyone doing this morning? Awesome, love that. All right. My name's Andrew. I'm one of the pastors here at Hillcrest. That's where you're at, Hillcrest. Today is actually a really good day for lots of reasons, but one in particular, because you may or may not have known that this past week was the NFL draft, and us three Dallas Cowboys fans in the church finally have something to have hope in again, because we got some good picks, which is great, so it is a good day. I do want to ask that you do say a special prayer, though, for David, because the Vikings aren't looking that great, so just, in your quiet time, just lift him up for the Lord. I would love to start out by just asking you guys a quick question. Have you ever been in a place where believing something didn't feel inspiring, but it almost felt irresponsible to believe in that thing? Not like you're believing in something that's just not unlikely to happen, but there's no chance that this thing could happen, and yet you still want to believe it in anyways. I had one of these moments, actually, and it involved a toilet. So let's get into this. So now, it started simple. So I went into the bathroom, and I noticed a little water around the base of the toilet, and I thought, there's enough water there to make me nervous, but not like I have to call like a home restoration company or anything to fix it. So I was like, I can do this. Like, I'm a capable, strapping young man. I can take care of this myself. And so I did what any responsible adult would do. And I went onto YouTube and looked up what causes water around the base of a toilet. And 10 minutes later, 2 videos in, I found out that what I needed was a wax ring. And my wax ring under the toilet would, something happened. I don't know why it does it, but I didn't go that far in the video. But I knew I needed to replace this wax ring. So I went to Home Depot, bought the stuff, came back home, and step 1, shut off the water. I did that. I was like, I'm winning. All right, I'm doing this. Step 2, drain the tank, get a sponge, do all this stuff. I'm doing great. Our toilet has, it was 2 separate pieces, like the tank and then the actual toilet part, so I had to take them apart. I'm doing great. Everything's going smooth. I take out, it was gross, but I took out the old ring, had to scrape out this nasty stuff, and then, it's very gross. And then put the new one on, and I'm like, this is going good. I put the base of the toilet on, screw it all in, it's good, it's sturdy. I put the water tank back on, and I'm tightening it, and then I remember, that when I took it apart, there was some water around the seals, so I'm going to tighten this a little more. So you've done this before as well, I see. So I tightened it, and I was like, oh, this is still going. I tightened a little more, and then who said that? Yeah, tighten a little more, and then crack. What was that? That didn't sound good. And I just kind of wanted to pretend like nothing happened, but then I looked behind the toilet, and sure enough, a big old crack in the toilet, in the tank. I just touched it, and it just fell apart, and I'm like, no. So then what was just changing out a seal sent me back to Home Depot to buy a whole new toilet, and now I'm bringing that back in, and I'm taking the old one out and putting a new one on. I don't know if you ever had to carry a toilet before. They're super awkward. Like, it looks easy, but like the weight is heavy on one side, and you have to do this weird thing. And I just saw myself doing it. I was like, you look foolish. So I felt so dumb, but finally got it all taken care of. And I was like, man, that was a good skill. But then the reason I wanted to do it in the first place was because I was like, man, I'm not going to hire a plumber to come and do this. Like, they're so expensive and blah, 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 I can do this. And after all things considered, the first wax ring, the first trip to Home Depot, the second trip to Home Depot, the toilet, I ended up spending way more on this dang toilet than if I just called a plumber in the first place. Toilets are not cheap, by the way. So, reason I bring that up is because what started out as like a simple fix that I thought I can do on my own started growing and getting harder and harder. And then the next thing you know, it was something that I could not fix on my own any longer. And yet I still was like, I need to do this. And I kept going and I kept pushing. And in this situation, yeah, I was able to take care of it. But then in my life, I start to think about this. And I start to think that there are plenty of times in my life where I look at something and I think that is just so far beyond what I can do on my own. That there's nothing that I can, there's nothing I can do or say or even believe at this point to do this thing or to do what I would like to come to fruition. There's just no way that this is going to happen because it just seems impossible. It's not hard anymore. It's beyond me. Where everything in front of me is telling me one thing and any kind of hope feels completely like disconnected from reality. And I'm not sure if you've ever been there before, but if you've ever been in a place where you want something to happen so bad, but all of the circumstances in front of you, all of the data, all of the facts say that's not going to happen. There's no way. Well, that's where we're at today as we continue on in Romans chapter 4, and Paul starts talking some more about Abraham. But there's this idea that we're going to be seeing today, and that idea is that faith trusts God's promise and power. Faith trusts in God's promise and power even when circumstances make it seem impossible. That's what faith is. Faith is trusting in God's promise and power when circumstances make it seem impossible. Because when it comes to passages like Romans 4, like we're going to be stepping into, these types of moments, this is what we're going to see in today's passage. As we look at Abraham, as we look at what he went through, we're going to see that faith is far beyond what we think would make sense in our reality. And before we jump into our passage today, I would love if you just join me in a word of prayer. God, thank you so much for this morning, God. You are so good. You are so much more than we deserve, God. Thank you for your love for us. Thank you for what you did by sending your son to die on the cross, God. Thank you for this time now as we read your word. God, I pray that you speak to us through it. Lord, I pray that whatever message you have for each one of us in this room today, that it'll be received, that it'll be heard, that we will be convicted, that we will be challenged, but we will also be encouraged. And that through today, through this morning, God, your word can come alive and we can see how you're moving in our lives. We love you, Lord. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're going to be in Romans chapter 4, verses 18 to 21. If you have your Bible, you can follow along as I read. It says, "In hope he believed against hope, that he should become the father of many nations, as he had been told, so shall your offspring be. He did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body, which was as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old, or when he considered the barrenness of Sarah's womb. No unbelief made him waver concerning the promise of God, but he grew strong in his faith, and he gave glory to God, fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised." So Paul has spent Romans 1 through 3 leveling the playing field. He's saying, hey, there's no one that earns their way to God. You cannot do anything to earn your way to God. He's made that very clear over and over again, and everyone needs grace. So Romans 1, chapters 1 through 3, he's just laying it out there. And then in Romans 4, he brings in Abraham. Not as a hero to admire, but as an example, as evidence of what it looks like to have faith. And if you want to understand how someone is made right with God, he's like, hey, look to Abraham. Not his perfection, because he wasn't perfect, but because he had this ultimate faith, a kind of faith that shows up when believing stops making sense. And so a point that we're going to hit on today, something that I would really like for you to consider, is that faith doesn't ignore reality. It simply refuses to let reality have the final word. Listen to that again really quick. Faith doesn't ignore reality. It doesn't pretend like the things in front of you aren't there. It just doesn't let what we see be the ultimate word in the end. And so from a human perspective, it didn't make sense that Abraham would be the father of many nations. Like Paul said, Abraham is old. He had no kids, and his body is described as good as dead. It's like, man, Paul, you really, like, did you really have to put that one in? He's like, I was going to tell you, like, he was old. Like, he's as good as dead. And we get that he's old, but he's like, no, he's like really old. Like, it's crazy. And on top of that, his wife, Sarah, was barren. She couldn't have kids. So so Abraham is going to be the father of many nations without any children. He's super old, and his wife can't have kids. So this doesn't make sense, right? From a human understanding, it doesn't make sense. Like, how can this be true for him? It's not just unlikely, like it seems impossible. And Paul says that Abraham considered it. Paul said Abraham considered all that. He considered all these things that were in front of him. He didn't ignore reality. He didn't pretend like everything was fine. He looked at the facts, but refused to let the facts have the final word. And that's where we start to struggle, because oftentimes I think we can think that faith, like just saying, oh, I have faith, like it's almost like we pretend, or like we imagine things like, oh, I have faith in God. Like sometimes it feels like when we say that, we don't really believe that God's going to do what he says he's going to do, but it's almost like wishful thinking that we have. And that's not what's happening at all with Abraham. He is fully convinced that what God said is going to happen is going to happen. So we can start to wander and be like, oh yeah, like that would be awesome. Like, oh, that would be cool if God did this, not really believing he is. And Abraham's like, no. No, he said it's going to happen, so it's going to happen. And he's like, yeah, this is what I see, but that's not all that there really is. And so biblical faith doesn't deny reality. It just refuses to let reality be the ultimate say. It says, yes, this is what I see, but this is not all that this is not all that there is. And for some of us, we might be staring at situations right now in our lives, right now, currently, that look impossible to us. That they feel like there's nothing that I can do about it. And you might feel like whatever is happening in your life is just the way it is. It's just final. And this tension you feel isn't because you lack faith. It's because you actually see clearly, like because you're a human who sees things in front of you. And so the question isn't, do you see reality? No, the question is more like, who gets the final word? Like where are you going to put your ultimate hope? Where are you going to put your ultimate trust? And here's where it gets even more personal, because Abraham didn't just face external impossibility, he faced this internal tension as well. He believed the promise, but then at one point, he still took things into his own hands. So like, wait, Abraham, you said that you believed God was going to do this, but you still decided to try to hurry him up a little bit. You try to take things into your own hands. How? When Sarah couldn't get pregnant, Sarah was like, hey, this isn't working, but maybe you can take my slave, Hagar, to go and have a baby with her. And Abraham's like, sure. But why did he do that? Because he believed in God's, he believed in the result that God promised. He did believe it, but he struggled to trust the process that God was using. I know I struggle with that a lot. Like, I believe that God is for me. I believe that God has called me to a specific purpose and plan for my life. Like, I believe that the things that God has said about heaven are true. I believe these things, and then I still get stuck here, like, but I still have all these things that I need to figure out. Like, I still have all these stresses that I don't know what to do with. And it hits close to home because I think that it's not just Abraham and it's not just me. I think that we all start to feel this at some time. We say, God, I trust you, and then step in to try to make things happen ourselves. And that leads us to something important. We need to remember that unbelief isn't always walking away from God. Sometimes it's just trying to help him out. So you can have unbelief and still believe in who God is and his promises, but that unbelief shows up in how you try to force his hand a bit. It leads us to understand that faith is strengthened when it clings to God's character and not your circumstances. So we can have this unbelief, ultimate belief in God, don't fully believe the circumstances, and then we can start to realize that faith is strengthened when we cling to who he is as opposed to the circumstances. And then in verse 20, it says that no unbelief made him waver, but he grew strong in his faith. Like, man, Abraham, he's such a good guy. Like, through everything, like, he didn't waver in his faith, and he grew strong in his faith. And I'm like, wait, hold on, let's back up. Like, wait, what? Like, that doesn't make sense, because we just talked about how he did waver in his faith, right? Like, he believed in God's promise, but he took things into his own hands. Like, if you know his story, like, this will raise a question. Like, we just talked about that, like, that he did doubt, that he took matters into his own hands. So what is Paul talking about here? Like, he did believe in God's ultimate promise, but he tried to force his hand by having a baby with his wife's slave. So what's going on here? Is this some kind of like revisionist history that Paul's trying to create here? Like saying, that's what he really did, but this is what it really was? Like, so is he lying here? What's happening? And the answer is simply no. Paul isn't pretending that Abraham is perfect. No one was. Anybody hearing what Paul is saying is not going to think Abraham was this perfect man. He's just simply highlighting the trajectory of his faith. At the core of his life, Abraham trusted God. And over time, that trust grew. And you actually see this very clearly when you see what Abraham was actually willing to sacrifice later on in his life. Abraham fully believed that God's promise to make him the father of many nations was true. Yes, he messed up by sleeping with Hagar. But then God was still faithful, gave him Isaac. And we see that Abraham grew in his faith. We see that he did not waver in his belief in the promise. How do we see that? Because when God said, hey, Abraham, go sacrifice your son on the mountain, I'm sure Abraham was like, wait a minute, like, he is the fulfillment of the promise that you said. Like, I'm going to be the father of many nations. You gave me him to be his father, to continue my line to many nations. And now you're saying go sacrifice him? Like, you're going to take that away from me? And we see the growth and the maturity in Abraham's trust, because what did he do? He actually did what he was called to do. He was willing to sacrifice his son because God called him to. Now, by the grace of God, and God knew it beforehand, it wasn't going to happen. He stopped it and provided another sacrifice. But the point is that Abraham was faithful even to the point of trusting God when it even meant giving up the fulfillment of the promise. So there is a ton of serious maturity that's happening here. And this actually helps us understand our own faith, because there's really three categories of faith that we can look at. There's belief, there's unbelief, and then there's disbelief. So belief is saying, yes, I full on believe, trust God. Like, I fully trust God. I believe in your promises. I believe that you're with me now. Like, there is no doubt in my mind. And then there's unbelief that says, I trust God, but I'm struggling. Yes, I trust you, Lord, but I'm struggling right now, and I'm still working on it. And then there's disbelief that says, I don't trust God at all. Like, I full on reject God. So belief is no questioning. Unbelief is, yes, I believe, but I'm struggling. And then disbelief is, I don't believe in God at all. And if we look specifically at unbelief, unbelief is not the absence of faith. It's actually the battle within faith. And unbelief can show up in our lives in a myriad of ways. It can show up in our lives and how we practice impatience. Like, if we know that we're supposed to wait for something, but we want to hurry it up, similar to Abraham, we try to step in and we try to control things. Like, where God, I know, like, I need to just lay my finances at your feet, and we're struggling financially. And so, like, I believe you're going to provide, but I'm just going to go get as much overtime as I can. And I'm going to, like, work myself to the bone. And yeah, my family's going to suffer, and I'm going to be, like, going crazy and stressed out, but I'm going to do it because I need to do this. I believe you're going to provide, but I'm going to do this. Or when there's a situation where you just feel like you know better than God. You know what needs to happen better. You would never say that, but your actions would show that. It can also come across as when we get angry or when we get envious of others, like you wish you had what they have and you wish that God would hurry up. Or fear of what's happening in your life. All these different things can show this unbelief. It doesn't mean you don't have faith. It just means you're struggling. And those aren't just emotions. They're places where we struggle to trust God. And Abraham had moments of unbelief, but not a life of disbelief. And we see this explained. We see Jesus actually talk about this concept of unbelief even more in Mark 9. There's a story of Jesus, his disciples are out, and Jesus comes to meet up with his disciples, and there's this big crowd, and there's a father there, and his boy, his son, is possessed by this evil spirit, and the disciples can't cast out this spirit, and they're like, what's going on? The crowd's confused because they were doing other miracles and stuff, and so Jesus walks up, and he looks at what's happening, and then the father says, but if you can do anything, to Jesus, but if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus' response is like a boss move. Like, how he answers it is incredible. Jesus says, and Jesus said to him, if you can, like you're saying like, if I can do it, like if you can do anything, like, do you know who you're talking to? Like, it's me, it's Jesus. Like, if you can, like all things are possible for the one who believes. And then the father's response is profound. And he says, immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help me in my unbelief. How often are we there where we believe that God is moving? We believe that God has a plan for our lives. We believe that he wants us to do certain things, and yet we still struggle. Help me in my unbelief. That's not contradiction, that's honesty. And this is where it gets kind of personal for me, to be honest. There was a moment in my life where believing that God had a plan for me didn't make any sense. You may know, about 9 years ago, I had a near-death experience. I went through a very traumatic accident where I had a near-complete amputation of my left arm. You can kind of see this big scar here. It's a crazy story. But I was working at my church, and I was just up there cleaning our sidewalks. It had rained. There was some leaves on the sidewalks. It was Saturday morning. I was up there by myself. And I was just cleaning the sidewalks, and I rounded the corner of the building, and I turned to get some leaves, and I just stepped back, lost my balance, and as I fell back, I tried to catch myself on the building. But I didn't put my arm on the building. I put my arm on an old single-pane glass window. And as I was falling backwards, you may have heard people talk about like everything turning into slow motion. Like that's what happened to me. And I'm falling so slowly, and I feel my hand on the window, and I feel the window flexing. And I know this glass is about to shatter, and there's nothing I can do about it. And then sure enough, my hand goes through the window. Everything starts going fast again, and the jagged glass in the bottom of the window just and slices my arm completely. Everything was severed except for my bones. So my arteries, my muscle, my tendons, everything was cut. I would do every other year, I'd get my first aid CPR training renewed. So first thing, like stop the bleeding and get help. So I jump up, I grab my arm, and I just start running through our back parking lot trying to get to the street. Help, help, help. I'm screaming as loud as I can. And then I didn't get very far, maybe 50, 60 feet. I start to get a little dizzy. And so I let go of my arm. Lots of blood starts pouring out, and I reach in my pocket, and I pull out my phone, and I call 911. I say, 911, what's your emergency? And I said, I just cut off my arm. I need help. And they said, where are you? And 1250 Herbs Road. I need you. I'm in the back. Come, please hurry. And at that moment, I don't know how I was able to do that. I don't. It's by the grace of God. And the whole story has so many miracles that took place, so many miracles that allowed me to be here today. But at that moment, then a young man runs up, no shoes on, barefoot. I was like, is that Jack? No, I'm just kidding. Young man runs up, no shoes on. He was out looking for his cat, and I just hand him my phone. I'm getting really dizzy, and I can't really walk anymore, and I bend over, and I put my arms just hanging, and blood's pouring out. And I just stand or kneel and just say, or lean over and just start praying, God, please save me. I need to be here for my wife and my kids. God, please save me. I need to be here for my wife and my kids. And I just prayed it over and over and over. And then I started to get really dizzy. And I thought, I need to lay down because I'm going to fall and hurt myself, ironically. Like, I was worried about falling and hurting myself. But so I just lay on my back. And as soon as I laid down, everything disappeared. And I'm standing in the middle of the brightest, whitest light I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not in pain. I'm not scared. I'm at complete peace. There's this warmth that flows over my body, and I'm happy. Like, I'm totally fine. And it was just white everywhere. I'm like, where am I? And then suddenly, the only way I can describe it is it looked like a gigantic movie screen surrounded me, 360 like movie screen. And that movie screen was covered, it was in the distance, but that movie screen was covered with thousands of little squares. And each square had a picture of either a person or an experience that has happened in my life. And I didn't know, I couldn't say, oh, that one was this and that one was this, but I knew that they were all very special. And then one at a time, a little square would zoom really close to my face. And the first one was my wife. Big smile, beautiful smile, just smiling. And then it zooms back. And then another one comes and it's my daughter, Kara. Huge smile. Then another one goes, that one goes back, and another one comes up, and it's Corbin. So he was really little at the time, this little butterball, chubby little guy, big smile on his face, and it zooms back. And then my wife again, my daughter, my son. Camilla wasn't born yet, so that's why she's not included in the story. But one after another, and they just had the biggest smiles on their face. And then all that disappeared, and I'm standing in this white. And I was like, this is it? And everything just kind of started to fade. But in reality, at that moment, the paramedics showed up. They threw a tourniquet on my arm, and they cinched it. And as soon as they cinched it, it legitimately felt like someone got my soul and just pushed it back into my body. And I went, and I took a big breath, and I'm looking around, and I see them working on me and cutting my clothes. And there's other people there now. There's a lady in the background like throwing up a bunch because of blood everywhere. And there's other people like freaking out. And there's a couple of like paramedics and whatnot, fire engines and stuff. And then what I didn't tell you is at our church, we had this little patio, cute little patio area, and we were going to have my daughter's 6-year-old birthday party there a couple hours later. And then at that moment, my mother-in-law is walking up with a big old bunch of balloons. And the fireman runs and stops her and says, you can't come over here. She doesn't know what's going on. She just saw all this commotion. And then she sees me on the ground and she screams, Andrew! And I responded with like what made sense to me at the time, like any rational person would say. I said, Sherry, it's okay. I cut off my arm. And she's freaking out. Balloons go flying away. And this story's long, and there's so many miracles that have that happened that I just don't have time to share. But they get me in, they backboard me, they throw me in the ambulance, and they drive me to the hospital. And I just kept asking this paramedic one question. I said, "Am I going to die?" And he just kept saying it. We need to stop the bleeding. I said, "Am I going to die?" We're just trying to stop the bleeding. I said, "Am I going to die?" He's like, "We need to stop the bleeding." I was like, "I'm not going to stop, man. Like, am I going to die?" And then we were like halfway there. By the grace of God, the hospital was like 1.5 miles from our church. We're like halfway there, and I asked him again, "Am I going to die?" He's like, "Man, I have a wife and kids. I can't die." And he stopped. He looked at me and said, "You're not going to die. you may not keep your arm, but you're not going to die. And I think he was lying to me. I don't think he knew if I was going to die or not, but it didn't matter. Because at that moment, when nothing else made sense in my life, when I had no reason to hope for my life, those simple words, "you're not going to die," changed everything for me. And now I had something to put my hope in, something that I just held on to. And I was like, I believe it. For whatever reason, I believe it. And I held on to that. And they took me to the hospital. After a 7-hour reattachment surgery, they come and get my wife, and they're like, "Hey, he's not stable. Like, he's up and down. His blood pressure is spiking and then dropping." And we had to give him 4 blood transfusions, and it was bad. It was very bad. And they were like, "Hey, we attached his arm. We don't know if it's going to stay or not. We don't know if he's going to live or not." Like, there was a lot that was up in the air. But, and this, I won't keep this one on there too long, but this was the reattachment. I won't keep it on there too long. That's actually a pretty version too. Like, that's a little while after. I'll go to this one instead. So now I'm in the hospital. I start to stabilize after a few days, and then I'm in this recovery room for a while. And at that moment, you would think, man, like, God answered my prayers. He saved my life. Like, I'm here with my wife and my kids. Like, these are incredible pictures here. But then that's when the deep pain started to kick in. See, before my injury, I was this guy that everyone went to for everything. Like, something broke, call Andrew, he'll fix it. You need help moving, call Andrew. He has a pickup truck and he'll take your stuff for you. Like, you have a problem, call Andrew, he'll take care of it for you. There was a time where one of our bathrooms flooded, and this sign was placed on the door. Out of Andrew, out of order. Andrew's coming. Like, this was a legitimate thing. Like, in my life, like, that's just kind of what I did. And now suddenly I can no longer do anything for anybody. One moment I'm trying to serve as many people I could, and I enjoyed it, and I would jump in at any moment, and now I can't do anything. Literally everything in my life stopped at that moment. And there was this deep, deep pain that I felt. Physically, yes, but even more emotionally and spiritually. Over the next several months, in the hospital, there was a moment, and then another one a couple months later, where there was some dark moments where I felt completely worthless. I felt like I had no value left at all. I felt that although I claimed Jesus as my Lord, and I said that I found my identity in him, when push came to shove, I actually found my identity in me and what I could do for people. And yes, I did have belief, but I had a lot of unbelief in my life as well. And I'm in this hospital, and there was one moment where I'm just bawling. I cannot stop the tears from coming because I feel so broken. I'm in pain, but I'm not even talking about the physical pain. I'm talking about the emotional and the mental pain that I'm struggling with. And my parents and my wife was there, and I remember just saying, like, I don't know. That's why I had these up here. I don't have anything to live for. Like, I have no value. And my dad said something along the lines of, "Why do you think that's why we love you?" And my wife was sitting at my side, and she just said, "We don't love you for what you do for us. We love you for who you are." And that just meant so much to me. And this was a process of continually questioning the value of my life, of if there was anything that was left in me to do. Is there anything, God, do I have any purpose left? And then, and as I was sitting in that pain, there was a moment where I was alone. My family left. I was alone in this room. And I just prayed and said, "God, you say that you can cause all things to work for good for those who love you and are called according to your purpose." I said, "God, use this. use this in any way you can, and I'll deal with the pain. I'll deal with whatever comes. I need people to do everything for me at this point. I couldn't even go to the bathroom on my own. I couldn't dress myself. I couldn't do anything. I felt completely worthless, and I said, God, use this however you can. And to see how God has used this over the years is mind-blowing. There's a book written about like near-death experiences that I'm in, and I talk about my faith. There's a few magazines that have heard about my story and put me in there. I've been on the news a few times. Our local city government had this big like annual meeting, and they heard about my story, and they asked me to come and pray over the whole thing because they were inspired by my faith. And so like God took what I said, and I believed it, but I didn't know at the time how he was going to do it. But first he answered my prayer to save me. Then he said, I will take this and I will use it. And he has used it year after year. But there were things that were broken in a way that couldn't be undone. There still are. I still struggle in a lot of ways with this. And I felt completely hopeless. I felt worthless. And I struggled to believe that God could use a broken person like me. But God was still faithful and used people like my parents and like my incredible wife to teach me that faith isn't pretending that everything is okay. Faith is choosing to believe in God and believing that he is still good, still present, and that there is still joy even in the midst of unfavorable circumstances. When everything around you says otherwise, God is still good, and there is still joy to be found in that. And there were moments where the only thing I could hold on to, it wasn't a changed situation, it was a character of God. That he sees me, that he hasn't abandoned me, that my worth isn't tied into what I can do or what I've lost, that Jesus is enough and I can still find joy in him. And Paul reminds us of this in the last verse of our passage. And we see that faith ultimately rests in God's ability and not our own. And Paul says, fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised. Fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised. This is where it all lands. Abraham's confidence wasn't in his situation, it was in God's ability. You're not made right with God because of your ability, but because of his. That's the gospel. So let me bring it right to you here. Where are you feeling the tension right now between trusting God and taking control of your own life? What are you carrying right now that actually belongs to him? What would your life look like if you were fully convinced that God would do what he promised? Now, I don't want this to sound like you just pray about it and then you do nothing. That's not what I'm saying. Like, God still calls us to live a faithful and worthy life. He still calls us to work. He still calls us to show up and grade those papers. He still calls us to go and let it be your pleasure to serve chicken. Like, he still calls us to all these things. Yet we hold on to stuff like we are in control of it. What would it look like if you were fully convinced that God would do what he promised? When you look at Abraham, don't see a perfect man. See a man who wrestled, who doubted, who took control, but who also grew. But ultimately, who trusted God. Not perfectly, but genuinely. And that's the invitation. And some of us, if we're honest, we're trying to fix our